So coming back to this graph here, the introduction of these oils, how long does it take before we start to see health issues when these start to hit the market in a big way?
So this is coronary heart disease in the United States. And you can see that in the 19th century, so 1800 to 1900, there was only 8 papers that I'm aware of. I can only find 8 papers reporting on myocardial infarction, heart attack. Um, there's I can't even tell you how many papers there's relating to coronary heart disease in the last 50 years. But you can see it was an extraordinarily rare disorder. Physicians did not know of coronary heart disease in the 19th century. They just basically it was never seen. 1912, you can see James Herrick published the first known case of myocardial infarction, heart attack. This was documented with autopsy evidence. And then in the 1930s, coronary heart disease became the leading cause of death in the United States. It was completely unknown in 1910. Like almost no, even the physicians working in hospitals had never seen a heart attack. And it wasn't that they didn't know what a heart attack was. They did, but they'd never seen one. And anyway, so by 2010, we're at 32% of deaths, almost 1 in 3 due to coronary heart disease. So we'll look at here's cancer. And you can see this is the data from in 1811 comes from the town of Boston, Massachusetts. It was about 30,000 people at that time. And their bill of mortality showed that 1 in 188 people, is about 0.5%, died of cancer. And I've been researching this for quite a while now, and they were cancer was very well known. It's been known for 4,000 years, essentially. So wasn't that physicians, again, they certainly knew about cancer. But anyway, 1900, the cancer death rate elevated to 1 in 17. And again, by 2010, it's almost 1 in 3. It's 31.1% of people are dying of cancer. So that's a 62-fold increase in cancer deaths in 200 years. And it's not because we're living longer. I could go through that data separately. This is type 2 diabetes. If you look on the graph there, in 1890, Sir William Osler published this data that diabetes affected 0.0028% of people in the US. That's 2.8 per 100,000. You can see it climbed a lot. In fact, it climbed 132-fold by 1935 to 0.37%. And if you think about it, that's the difference there is mostly the vegetable oils. And anyway, you can see it just climbs. We're all the way at 13% by 2016. Which is a 4,643-fold increase in diabetes in 126 years. Now, I always remind my audience at this point that if diabetes had doubled, that would be statistically significant. So if it went from 0.0028% to 0.0056%, that would be statistically significant. It went up 4,643-fold. From 2.8 per 100,000 people to 13,000 per 100,000. Again, but in almost perfect parallel to the vegetable oils. This is age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of irreversible vision loss and blindness in people over the age of 50 worldwide. There is less than 50 cases in all the world's literature in an 80-year period between 1851, when it was first discoverable, and 1930. And then by 2020, we're at 196 million cases, expected to be 288 million cases by 2040. So again, a massive increase. This here next, this is Alzheimer's and dementia. And now, physician Alois Alzheimer diagnosed and presented the first known case of Alzheimer's disease. It wasn't named that at the time, of course. It was that they named it that later. One of his colleagues gave it this name. But anyway, first known case, 1908. You can see in 1948, for example, there was 150 cases in all the world's literature that year. Where are we in 2023? 55 million cases, 10 million new cases of Alzheimer's and dementia per year in the world now, 10 million. That's one new case every 3 seconds. Um, and then we'll just go to diabetes, or I'm sorry, obesity, and you can see that this is Scott Allen Carson's work from the 19th century. Obesity was 1.2% in men age 18 to 80. There was no data on women, and you can see that obesity had already elevated 11-fold by 1960 when we were at 13% obesity. So this is when we thought we were really lean and fit and all that, and we had no problems. Well, it's not true. This problem was already well on its way. Again, you can see, I'll just pick a couple of them. 1999, we're at 30.5%. By 2018, 42.5% obesity is what that was in 2018, and another 31.4%, I believe it is, overweight. So the total overweight and obese in the United States as of 2018, right around 74%, right? So but just this data, just on obesity, that's a 35-fold increase in obesity in 118 years. Again, from 1900 to 2018.
Wow, looking at these graphs is just so powerful for a couple of reasons. One, I knew we were in a real health crisis, but seeing how severe it is by the graphs is just crazy. And then two, thinking of these diseases as being something that have been around for a long time, and then again putting years to when they really kicked off and started to become real issues. It's really eye-opening.
Yeah. I mean, I spent probably at least a year and a half of my life just researching the what I presented here in 3 or 4 minutes, whatever that took. It's that really a lot of that took me years to eventually come across, get all that data, because data is really hard to come by. You just have to sift through thousands of books and papers and all that. But anyway, yeah. So diseases like coronary heart disease, um, uh, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, macular degeneration, Alzheimer's, all these diseases that are unknown in the 19th century, unknown. Like almost no physician on the planet had ever witnessed any of these diseases. And again, cancer was pretty rare at one point. And I'm working on a paper for that. We're going to present this. It's never been presented, this data that we're going to present on looking at cancer prevalence through history. But again, I'm finding that in the United States and in Canada, back around 1800, only about 0.3 to 0.5% of the people in those countries were dying of cancer. Again, it's in the U.S. it's around 31% today.
And where things become a little bit gray, and I think it's important for your hypothesis to sift through this, is the fact that during this time frame, we've had a lot of different changes in the food supply. We've had, trans fats, processed foods, sugars being introduced on mass scale, and refined flours. So many different changes along with the seed oil piece. So to prove our point of why seed oils is the actual culprit, or at least a big part of that, let's get into the nuance of how we can tease those apart.
Okay. So we'll go to this graph. This is first, you can see here that this is a graph on obesity versus vegetable oils. And you can see that when in 1900, I'll just have to throw out some numbers here, when obesity was 1.2%, vegetable oil consumption was 1 gram a day. If you jump over there to 1961, when obesity was 13.4%, vegetable oil consumption was 19 grams a day. It's almost 1 for 1, like a 1 gram increase, another percent increase, not quite, but you can see it's close. Increase in obesity. And then you can see that by 2018, on the far right of the graph, 42.5% obesity. What was vegetable oils? Well, the data ended the best data ended in 2010 when vegetable oil consumption was 80 grams a day. So we went from 1 gram a day essentially right around 1 gram a day in 1900 to 80 grams a day by 2010. And so you can see this striking correlation with vegetable oils. Okay, so here we'll throw sugars into the graph here. And you can see the sugars in the green, vegetable oils in the blue, and obesity in the red. Well, you can see that, I'll give you a couple of numbers here. By 1890, sugar consumption was 10.8% of calories. It's actually pretty high. It's higher than the World Health Organization recommendations today. But again, we had obesity was 1.2%, and we had no heart disease, very low cancer, almost no diabetes. You jump over here, this part of the graph in about 1935, which is right around here. I'm sorry, that's right around in there. Sugar consumption was 440 calories a day. It's around 22% of total calorie consumption, right? And yet obesity was about 3 or 4%. And so between 1935 and way over here in 2016, which is where the data ends, the sugar hardly changed. So it was around right over here. We're around 440 calories. Here is 526 calories. It went up 86 calories between these 2 points. All right. So, and as a percentage, and we'll see this later, it was around 22% of the diet sugar back here in the 1930s. Right over here in 2016, 24% of the diet. So the sugar barely changed, right? While the obesity went from around 3% over here, right in here, 3% up to 42.5%, right? So there's a striking correlation to the vegetable oil consumption, almost no correlation to sugar consumption, even negative as we move forward. So this is a different graph, and you can see.
I just wanted to clarify, as we're all hearing about sugar, are we talking about just added sugar? Because sugar is quite ambiguous. Are we talking about
yes.
certain carbohydrates like refined flours are pretty much like sugar in the body? How do we define that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, and I've got a graph on that, or a slide on that. But I'll just tell you so this data comes from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the FAO, and or most of the data, all the data from 1961 forward, and anyway, other government organizations prior to 1961. But sugar is added sugar to the diet, and it's all forms of sugar. So it's all table sugar, whatever you want to call it, white sugar, brown sugar, powdered sugar, all of those, all of the syrups. So that would be corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, maple syrup, and honey, and like all forms of any kind of added sugar, that is in the food supply. So like all of the sugar sweetened beverages, all of those things are what's labeled here as sugar. Okay, so it's not sugars in fruit and vegetables, right? Those are not tracked. There's no way to really track those, as far as I know. But anyway, this is just added sugars to the diet.
And then things like breads and pastas, is that included in your data somehow?
If they have, well, no, not that wouldn't be. That data would come under like carbohydrates,
right? That's what I'm getting at.
But it wouldn't. Oh yeah, so I have that data. I can show you that too. So that's on a separate slide. But this is just added sugars to the diet. Yeah. It wouldn't be flour. That would be totally separate. Yeah. So did I answer you?
No, that's perfect.
Jesse?
Yeah, let's continue with the next graph.
Okay, so this is much more recent. You can see this is the data on obesity versus vegetable oil and sugar since 1961, and we're kind of zoomed in here, but you can see between 1961 and 2016, I think is where this data ends approximately, that the sugars is only up 14%, but the vegetable oil is up 230%, and the obesity is up 226%. So again, the sugars barely changed here, right? And then if we look, while obesity goes through the roof, from 13% in 1961 to 42.5% in 2018. And now we'll jump even a little more recent. This is 1999 to 2018, where we can see obesity climbed from 30.5% to 42.5%, but the sugar is on the decline, right? So after 2002, sugar is overall trend is downward, but the vegetable oil is high and still actually climbing a little bit, right? And here's another graph on the same thing showing severe obesity. This is the BMI above 40, I believe it is. That you can see severe obesity was 4.7% in 1999, jumped to 9.2%, doubled by 2018. But again, while the sugars are on the decline. And so I think we've gone through, let's see. Yeah, we've done these. This is okay. Now here's carbohydrates. So this is kind of getting at your question. So here's the carbohydrates you can see in the United States on the decline after 1997. But the obesity, and I'll show you the numbers here on a different slide. So here's obesity in 1997 was about 29%. And by 2013, which is where carbohydrates stopped declining, the obesity climbed to 38%. So we have this, huge increase in obesity, but the carbohydrates have been declining since 1997. And I'll jump down to, and this is pretty interesting because for those who just want to vilify carbohydrates, for example, in total, you can see that carbohydrates were much higher way back in, as compared to most of the last century. In 1909, when we were lean, fit, healthy, almost obesity and diabetes and chronic disease free. And then the carbohydrates declined through the middle of the century. You can see here, and then started climbing again around around 1980-ish. This is when we went low fat, right? So the carbohydrates go back up until again 1997, and then they began to decline again. And then interestingly, this green line shows the total calories. Now the calories have been going up as the seed oils went up, right? And there's mechanisms behind that. But anyway, you can see the calories went up, but the calories stopped going up in 2002, and they've since been on the decline. So during our worst periods of increases in obesity and diabetes, we have sugar, carbohydrates, and calories all on the decline in the United States.
No, it's interesting.
Sugar declining after 2002, carbohydrates declining after 1997, calories declining after 2002.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Everybody seems to know that all of these diseases, obesity, coronary heart disease, atherosclerosis, Alzheimer's, macular degeneration, diabetes, all these things are connected by mitochondrial dysfunction. Why are they connected?